Okay, take three, having some trouble with the audio. All right, so I was just saying that I wanted to thank Rabbi Gimple for pointing us to a Rashi that addresses a question we had yesterday, which is, although the verse states, and she is impure more than three times, the Gemara only cited to three of them to make the derivation yesterday that one time that says she's defiled is to say she's forbidden to be with her husband. One time she says that she's defiled is to tell us she's forbidden to the paramour. And the third time she says she's forbidden is to tell us that even if she's a kohen, she's a daughter of a kohen, she was married to a kohen, yet because she was defiled, or at least she's in doubt of being defiled, she cannot eat truma anymore. Okay, and we had discussed that the verse actually says it more times, but we have verse 13. Those three times we decided were in verse 14, 25, and 27, if I remember correctly. Is that right? Yeah?
27 and 29.
29, my apologies. So we had noted that the verse says in verse 13 already that she is defiled. And we were wondering why that one's not used. So Rabbi Gimple pointed us to the Rashi on the Mishnah, which I had learned. It just wasn't in, it slipped out of my mind for whatever reason. And there, Rashi tells us to, cites back to the first page of the Gemara, where there we derive from this verse that a single witness that sees what happened behind closed doors, right? The premise of the Sotah law is that we know they're secluded, but we don't know what happened behind closed doors. So ordinarily, to establish an event in Torah, you need to have two witnesses. Yet, when it comes to the Sotah law, because of this verse, we conclude that even a single witness that saw that behind closed doors they were intimate, the Sotah law is called off. And that's why that verse is not used here, because it's already been used to tell us something else way earlier. Yeah? It still doesn't explain, so this is very helpful, and thank you. It still doesn't explain the order, why the Gemara seems to be quoting the verses not in the order they appear in Scripture.
Wait, but
at least it explains that.
Can you just repeat that quickly?
Ordinarily,
why these other verses weren't used?
It's only one of the verses, verse 13, right?
Verse 13, only one verse.
There's four verses that say, and she is impure.
Okay, fine.
The first one is the fourth one that's not being used here. And that was already used way earlier in the first page of the Gemara to tell us that a single witness can establish that she has been defiled. That she indeed engaged intimately behind closed doors, calling off the Sotah law. Although ordinarily you would need two witnesses to tell us about an event. Okay, I think I want to go through an elaborate discussion there.
Oh, so verse 13 is teaching that point.
That's right.
So that's already, it's not free to be used.
That's right. That's right. That's the principle that when we have halachic exegesis, the words have to be freed for us to extrapolate meaning from them.
And therefore that's already been taken.
And that verse has already been taken way back in the beginning of the Gemara, and therefore the Gemara here only uses these three.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank Rabbi Gimple for that.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, so now we continue our Gemara. The Gemara left off yesterday by telling us what? How much the more so from the Sotah law to the law of the Sheret, the law of the impure animal that confers impurity by touching. And we had how much the more so, right? The principle of how much the more so. I remember as a child we had this visualization that helped us. It's a funny thing, but it helped you visualize. I had a shirt, that had it was like two colors of blue, light and dark blue, and one sleeve was light blue, and one sleeve was light blue, and one sleeve was dark blue. So to visualize how much the more so the Kal Vachomer, I think my teacher came up with this visualization, or myself, I don't remember exactly. Anyway, this was the visualization we were given. If you took Levi New's dark blue shirt, and we saw on the dark blue shirt that there was one area we can see that's light blue, then certainly the light blue side will definitely be light blue in that area, in that regard. If the dark part of the shirt has the light, and certainly the light part has the light, right? In other words, when something is ordinarily strict, and yet we see a leniency, then certainly the lenient thing to begin with is lenient. That's a chayim v'kal. Or reverse. You see something which is ordinarily lenient, yet has a certain stringency, and certainly the thing which is more stringent always will definitely have the stringency that the leniency guy has.
See a dark spot on the light side.
That's right. That's correct. So that's exactly, that's the visualization.
Okay.
Exactly. So the Sotah law was ordinarily more lenient. It's more lenient when we compare it to the law of the sheretz, the law of the impure animal.
Yeah.
The impure creepy collies, specific ones that the Torah lists, not any, but specific ones. So how's that? Because when we compare the laws that we know about Sotah versus the law of the sheretz, when it comes to the Sotah, we learn and we know that if she was forced, God forbid, let's unpack this more, zoom out a little bit. We don't just mean the law of the Sotah, we mean the law of infidelity. Sotah is one specific law within infidelity, right? Which is that if we're in doubt over infidelity, here's the procedure. So let's not call it the law of the Sotah, let's call it the law of infidelity. We understand in the laws of infidelity that number one, if there was an accidental infidelity, she thought it was her husband and it ended up not being her husband.
She's not responsible.
And she's not responsible. Number two, if God forbid she was raped, she's also not responsible. So when infidelity was forced upon her, or infidelity was accident, we don't treat it as an infidelity halachically to the point that she has all the consequences of infidelity. Yeah. And yet, if we are in doubt as to their infidelity, i.e. the law of the Sotah, we treat it as if she was actually unfaithful. Presumption of infidelity, even though she wasn't actually unfaithful. Or we don't know at least.
No.
But we treat her as if it was an actual.
So
Until proven otherwise, which is the law of the Sotah. Until proven otherwise, where she drinks the water to prove her faithfulness. So ordinarily, unfaithfulness is lenient in these two regards, if she was forced or if it was accidental. And yet, when it comes to doubt, we treat it stringently and consider it as an actual. That's the case. Now look at the sheretz. When it comes to the sheretz, if there was unintentionally touched it, you're still impure. If someone forcibly made you touch it, also impure. So how much more so? When there's doubt, you definitely can make you impure. Now I was thinking about it last night, trying to get to the logic of it, and this is what came to me. Why is it indeed that when it comes to the impurities, we don't care for intentional, unintentional, forced, not forced? When it comes to infidelity, we do care. And if it was forced, we're not going to hold you accountable. If it was accidental, not hold you accountable. So we might suggest like this. We talked about impurity in the past and we visualized it as like a spiritual virus. So a spiritual virus, or a virus, if we can use that language, couldn't care less about the intentions with which you consume that virus. But I didn't mean to hang out with the guy who had fever. It doesn't matter, you catch it anyway. It was forced upon me. It doesn't matter. The virus is the virus. It travels irrespective. In the language of the briske hakira, it's the chefza. The object of the thing exists irrespective of your intention. The object of impurity, the virus of spiritual impurity, is conferred whether you meant it or didn't mean it. But when it comes to infidelity, the act is an issue, but much more importantly is the human relationship here.
It doesn't come into existence until you make it.
That's right. The whole unfaithfulness is built upon the human interrelation. And if it was forced, we're going to hold the human accountable because the act happened to have happened to the person. The whole point here is the human relationship. Now, when it comes to a doubt, it's a different story. Because when it comes to a doubt, even though ordinarily, and this is the Kal V'chomer, even though ordinarily when it comes to unfaithfulness, we think of it not as the actual fact, but as the human relationship here. And if it was accidental, we're not going to hold you accountable. And if the person was forced, we're not either going to hold them accountable. Because it's about the human relationship here, not about whether the act happened. And yet, when it comes to a doubt, if there's a doubt, maybe this person engaged, that's enough to render lack of trust between the humans, and therefore it's off. So how much more so when it comes to impurity, where it's not a question of the human interaction, it's a question of the fact. And if there's a doubt, maybe the fact happened, and therefore we have to consider it. Following? I think this may be another layer to understand this Kal V'chomer. Is that clear? Good morning, Judge. Welcome on.
I like the fact that you had that question.
Good morning, Rabbi.
No, my mind is, I have that question.
Rabbi, your logic here.
Between the shards.
Yeah. So go ahead, Judge. Yeah.
Rabbi, your logic is impeccable. It's so beautifully
Thank you.
brought forward, because when we think of the sheretz, the whole idea is of something that's crawling and that's horizontal. And the whole concept here has a very beautiful, lofty concept also of that which is vertical, a man being a bridge between a heaven and earth, human being being between heaven and earth, being able to transcend ourselves, recognizing that we're transcending ourselves. So on the whole question of intention and not intention, yeh po, yeh sham. When it was yeh sham, I had to go there. But if the sham came to me, that's a different story too. That's not the intention. It was forced on me, the sham to come po.
Right.
So the concept here of the sheretz, of the horizontal and the vertical, is so important, because the same thing with the meth, with a corpse, and so the whole idea is, how do we recognize our transcendence on a constant basis, and between the soul that reaches to the highest of heavens and goes beyond us, and what we are when we're vertical rather than horizontal. Yeah. So it's beautiful what you brought in the sheretz here, the way you did it.
That's so deep.
Another visualization might be the difference between going to a lawyer versus going to a doctor. It's the same kind of thing. If you're talking about a spiritual virus, you're talking about horizontal, then it doesn't matter. The lines connect, and that's the end of it. So the doctor doesn't care what your intentions were when you got sick. Look at the sickness. When you go to a lawyer and you're coming to a judge, absolutely the question of your intention is relevant. Right? So maybe that's another visualization. Okay. So now the Gemara says like this. Considering that we just established that the law of doubt, or establishing a doubt as an actual, is derived from Sotah. So there's a principle in request that we explain principles as we come upon them. So there's a principle which is, I have to get the Hebrew term right, which is Dayer lenidin liyos kenadon. I think I got it right. Which is, it's enough for the learned to be as much as that which it learned from. Right? If the foundation for your law is based on a different law, then the limitations of your law is going to be limited to the limitations of that law. Because you cannot extrapolate a law from somewhere else and then become bigger than the place from which you extrapolated. You don't have more to extrapolate. So let's use our case as an example. If the entire fact how do we know that when we're in doubt, whether you touched a sheretz, if you're in doubt, whether you contracted this impurity, you go stringent and consider it as if you got that impurity. Where do we know that from? From the law of the Sotah. That's the place from which we derive the law. Right? So now we have to look at the law of the Sotah. Are there any limitations on this doubt? As to this rule, when we say that the doubt is considered as actual, and whatever limitations exist at Sotah must be applied to the law of the sheretz as well. Because the sheretz cannot be more stringent than the place from which it learned.
Yeah, it can't be independent of its source.
It can't be independent of its source. Well put. So let's see the Gemara. Umimakim shabasa, top of Chavches Amud Beis, top of 28b. Umimakim shabasa, and from the very location from which you arrived. Namely, you, sheretz, derived your principle that we treat doubts as actual from Sotah. So let's go back to the place from which you derived and see what the limitations are there. Mas Sotah. Just like when it comes to a Sotah, doubt of infidelity is only reshus hayachid, only in a private domain. In the public square, doubt of infidelity in the public square, it's only a question of behind closed doors. So af sheretz, so too with sheretz. The same thing is true of any impurity, but for whatever reason, the Gemara here is discussing sheretz. And again, I mentioned this yesterday. I'm not, deeply familiar enough with the laws of impurity to comment on this, but so I'm just going to stick to what the Gemara says here. So af sheretz, so too when it comes to these sheretz, these impure animals, the doubt is only reshus hayachid. If a person is in doubt as to whether he touched one of these items in the private domain. In the private domain. So if I'm walking down a public thoroughfare and I'm not sure whether or not I touched a sheretz, I remain pure because it was a public domain. Because the entire law of the doubt for the sheretz is derived from Sotah. And the law of the Sotah is only applicable when they were in private. And therefore the doubt of me taking on the impurity by doubt of whether I touched a sheretz or not is only if this doubt was born in the private domain.
So, Rabbi, this is why I mentioned the idea of hayasham u hayapo.
Right. Where you are is just as relevant.
This distinction between private and public was derived from Sotah because she was
With the law of the sheretz, certainly. Sorry?
The law of the sheretz.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the law of the
Sotah was in private.
Because that's right. So the limitations on whatever limitations exist on turning a doubtful infidelity into an actual infidelity, those same limitations are applied to that which is derived from it, which is the sheretz. So limitation number one is that it has to be in private. It has to be in a private domain. Or another example is there's two pathways, one in which had a sheretz and one didn't have a sheretz. And I walked down one pathway and I'm not sure which one I walked down. Did I walk down the one that has, or did I walk down the one that doesn't have? So it's in public. Doubt, and therefore I am pure. But if I walked into a home and I'm in doubt whether I touched the sheretz or not, or I touched some creepy crawly, I'm not sure what it is, if it's a qualifying sheretz or not, because it's in private, I am pure. Because I'm deriving from the Sotah.
Impure, right?
Sorry? In private, I'm impure, yeah.
So this is not a contradiction to what we just learned earlier, right? It's an add-on.
Sorry?
This is an add-on to the home. Right?
This is an add-on to the Kal V'chomer. No, this is an extension to the Kal V'chomer.
Extension, I mean.
It's an extension.
Meaning it's not an opposition. When this sage or whomever, this right, just saying there's a further extension.
No, it's just an extension, yeah? Extension. Okay. Additionally, so too, mas Sotah, another limitation on Sotah, which will then apply to the sheretz. Mas Sotah, just like when it comes to a Sotah, davar sheyesh by das, the items about which there's a doubt have capacity to lishol, to respond to a question. They might be lying, but at least they can respond. So I can ask the woman or the guy, the paramour, were you unfaithful? I mean, they can lie about it, which is why I'm in doubt. I'm not sure what happened. But you can still ask them. They can say something about it. So af sheretz, so too when it comes to a sheretz, davar sheyesh by das lishol. It's this doubt and causing this doubt to be stringent and make them impure is only when the item in question is something that we're capable of asking a question. Did you touch or not? And he answers by saying, I don't know, which basically means only for a human. What if I'm not sure if a vessel touched the sheretz or not? I cannot ask a vessel, did you touch? Yeah, you got it? I cannot ask a vessel, did you touch the sheretz or not? A utensil, a fork, a spoon, I'm not sure if the spoon touched the sheretz or not. I can't ask the spoon, did you touch it or not? It doesn't have the capacity to respond. Human does. Right? So if a spoon, I'm not sure whether the spoon touched the sheretz or not. So it's pure.
Able to transfer? There's some degree of transference from the spoon to the person. Isn't that another?
We're talking about the sheretz to the spoon now.
Oh,
the sheretz to the spoon. Right?
Not the spoon to the person.
Sorry?
Not the spoon to the person.
Well, yeah, they're talking about the sheretz to the spoon.
Okay.
So you cannot ask the spoon, do you know if the sheretz touched you or not? And therefore, in that case, the doubt is pure. Because turning a doubt into an actual is limited to the Sotah, derived from the Sotah, and therefore has the same limitations of the Sotah. And the Sotah is only available to humans who can respond to questions, even if their response is a lie, or even if their response is, I don't know. But at least they can be asked and respond. Clear?
Yeah. This is derived also from Sotah. This rule is also
yes.
From Sotah.
So therefore the Gemara concludes, Mikan Amru, from here we derive something about which we can talk to and ask a question, a human being that can respond to our questions. And this item, this person, was in private, then tzveikai, if they're not sure about whether or not touch the sheretz, tamei, they're tamei, because it's a human and it's in private. Those are the two conditions to work out, to match the Sotah. If this human was in public domain, he's not sure if he touched a sheretz in public domain, sveika, he's in doubt, Torah is pure. Now, by das lishol, if he doesn't have the ability to respond to our questions, it's a spoon. Whether it was in a private domain, whether it was in a public domain, the doubt is pure.
That's for an inanimate object.
Yeah.
Non-human.
Yeah. So I want to look up the Rambam so we can see how the halacha actually plays out here. So let's look it up quickly. Let's do Chabad.org Rambam. Okay, so we're looking for Hilchos Avos Tomos, Halachach. So Tezvav, chapter 15, the laws of impurity. So let's go there. Sefer Torah.
Aren't there like several chapters?
Sorry? Yeah, Shar Avos Tomos. And Perek, what was it I say? Perek chapter 15, law number 8. Right, that's what we said. 15 law 8. On the side is a little citation. So let's see. 15 law 8 reads as follows. What is meant by a doubt that arose in a public domain? When impurity was located in the public domain, and there's a doubt whether a person or substance touched it or not, it is considered to be pure. If such a situation arose in a private domain, and there's a doubt whether a person or substance, it says or substance, touched it or not, it is considered to be impure, because it was in the private. And now 1 second, let's see the other one. This seems to be substances too.
So they're not conjunctive, the conditions, they could be either or.
Well, let's see. And then there's chapter 16, halacha number 1 and 2. Here you include substance, meaning even a substance.
In private. So
a substance in private is considered a substance in private is considered impure. But let's see chapter 16, halacha 1 and 2. Reads like this. Why do the sages rule that when there's a question of impurity in the public domain, the person should be considered pure? Because here the Gemara gives a different explanation. Oh, wait, let's see. Why? Yeah, you want to read along with me?
Yeah.
Sorry? Oh, thank you. So why do the sages rule when there is a question of impurity in the public domain, the person should be considered pure? Because the community offers the Paschal offering in a state of impurity when the majority of the people are impure. Now, if ritual impurity that was definitely established is superseded by the presence of the community, certainly this applied to a mere question of the presence of impurity, because there's a doubt. For all stringencies observed because of a doubt were instituted by the sages, as we explained in Hilchot Biyas Soros. Okay, why did they rule stringently concerning a doubt in private domain? That's about the public domain environment. Why do they rule stringently concerning that in the private domain? For in the instance of a Sotah who entered into privacy with the person concerning whom she was warned, even though there is only a doubt that she committed adultery, she's considered as impure with regard to her husband until she drinks the Sotah waters. Now, just as a Sotah, halacha 2 now, just as a Sotah and the person suspected of relations with her are two, so too when there are questions of impurity that involve two individuals, it is assumed that the person or the article is not pure. If, however, there are three people in a private domain where there is a question concerning impurity that occurs there, it is assumed that the person or the article is pure, as if the question arose in the public domain. So this idea of public and private goes so far in Rambam's view to say it's got to be no more than two people. Because as soon as there's three people, it surpasses the amount of people present in the Sotah question. Becomes public. Because it's all about the Sotah. Okay, so when does the above apply? When the person who could have contracted impurity has the knowledge to be asked and be examined regarding the details that occurred, as is the rule regarding the Sotah. When, however, there is a deaf mute, and you see, I'm referring to it, I thought it was a question of an object. He says there's a deaf mute. Interesting. Rashi doesn't, see, that's funny, because Rashi does not.
You can't answer questions.
That's right. Rashi does not tell us. Rashi just says, for example, a person, or questions of purity that a person was involved with. Rashi doesn't say a person who's capable of talking. Rashi just says a person, which is why I said the thing you can't ask is a object, right? Is that what I'm saying? I'm sorry, yeah. Again, Rashi only says when Rashi defines the thing that you can ask whether or not they're impure or not, Rashi just says a person.
Mm-hmm.
For example, a person or objects with which a person was handling. Rashi says a person. It doesn't say a speaking person. Now, Rashi doesn't say to the exclusion of what? A person to the exclusion of what? So I assumed it meant to the exclusion of utensils. But Rambam's learned differently. Talking person means a talking person and not a deaf mute person. Now, I would argue that Rashi disagrees with this. Because Rashi just says a person. Doesn't say a deaf mute person. Doesn't say a speaking person. Follow or not?
It's more general, you're saying.
No, again, the Gemara says,
a person.
No. Something that has the capacity to respond to our questions. End quote from the Gemara. Rashi says, for example, a human. That's all. And not a what? A human and not a what? A human and not what?
An object.
An object, that's how I understood it. Okay, but Rambam's not learning that way. Rambam says, the Gemara said.
Oh, I see, you put that.
Exactly. Because Rashi said.
It's compared to a person, a deaf mute.
That's right. Because Rashi just said, how do I define someone who I can ask? A human, as opposed to object. Whereas Rambam says, what does it mean a person who can respond to our questions? Literally, a person who can talk. But a deaf mute, who we learned already earlier does not work in the Sotah, doesn't have the same law here too. See, Rambam is being consistent. He is taking everything literally to compare to Sotah. Sotah has only two people, so max two people. If there's three people, you can't compare it to the Sotah anymore. Sotah doesn't work for deaf mute people. You can't bring the doubt of Sheret to deaf mute people either. Mamish going literal. You follow?
Yeah, so we don't know what to do with objects per se.
Let's see. Now, when, however, there's a deaf mute or an emotionally or intellectually compromised person, or a minor who does not know the details and is unable to respond to questions that are asked involved in a private domain, if a doubtless situation arose, it is assumed that the person of the article is pure. Person or article. What is implied? When a deaf mute, an emotionally or intellectually compromised person, or a minor who does not know how to respond to questions are found in a courtyard or in an alley where there is impurity and there's a question whether or not they came in contact with it, they are considered pure. Because they wouldn't be, because they don't have the law of the Sotah.
Alley or courtyard is deemed
Private domain. Yeah, that's right. Which means because we can't, because it's a person who wouldn't qualify as a Sotah. A deaf mute doesn't qualify as a Sotah.
Uh-huh.
Now, if I remember correctly, what about someone who's lame, can't walk? Someone who doesn't have arms?
Hold it up, please. Thank you.
when it comes to the Sotah, someone who's missing legs and arms doesn't qualify either.
Why? They could speak.
But they don't qualify for Sotah for other reasons, right? Because the Torah said that they have to be able to stand. Torah said that they have to be able to wave the objects. So if we're going to take, right, the verse of the Gemara says only speak. So that's my question. If Rambam was going to go so literal and say a person who can respond means literally someone who can physically respond because that's how the law applies in the Sotah, then why not say someone who's missing legs and arms also?
Not physically respond, but intellectually, because the Sotah also goes through a list of people who are
disqualified based on other things.
Based on imbecility and all these
well, that he says yes. Imbecility, he says yes, that's excluded. But what about someone missing arms and legs? What about someone missing arms and legs? They're disqualified from Sotah.
Oh yeah, they were.
They were disqualified. Someone who's blind is also disqualified from Sotah. Right? Let's continue going. Halacha 3. When a person is blind, sleeping, or walking at night, if there's a question whether or not they contracted impurity in the private domain, they are impure because they have knowledge to respond to questions, even though they don't qualify for Sotah. A blind person doesn't qualify for Sotah. Yeah, they do qualify for Sheretz.
Well, that seems like going outside the source.
Yeah, so I'm sure there's tons of commentary on this. I'm just pointing this out. This is interesting.
This is interesting now.
Yeah, so let's read, conclude this halacha. So when do we apply the principle that whether there's a question involving one who does not have the knowledge to respond to questions, it is assumed that the person of the article is pure? When the possibilities are equally balanced, there's no established presumption regarding the status. If, however, it is known that a given situation, one could have assumed contracted impurity is considered impure because it's a probability, not just a doubt. What is implied? An impure child is standing next to some dough, and there was also dough in his hand. The dough is deemed impure, for a child's habit is to pat dough, and it can be assumed that he did so. Nevertheless, too much should not be burnt because of this assumption. Okay. So we see here there might be some difference here between Rashi and Rambam in defining exactly who is this person. What does it mean when the Gemara says a person who has capability to respond to questions? Rashi just says, for example, a person. But he doesn't say to the exclusion of anything. He just says a person. Rashi didn't even say, for example, a person who qualifies as Sotah. Didn't even say that. Rashi didn't say that. Again, let's make it clear. The Gemara just said someone who has the knowledge to respond.
Yeah.
No definition. Rashi says, for example, a human. Rambam says a human who can speak. Intellectually, emotionally, and physically can speak. Right? This whole thing is very strange. I mean, like, why not compare it to the Sotah all the way? A guy who's missing arms, missing legs, blind. And Rashi is silent on to the exclusion of what? Just defines. What does it mean? A person who can respond? It means a human. Or the Gemara doesn't even say a person. The Gemara says davar, an item that can respond. An item meaning a human was touching an item, so the human can respond, even though the issue in question is an item, which is what Rashi says. Rashi says either a human himself or a human involved in some activity. To the exclusion of, Rashi doesn't say. I assume that meant to the exclusion of anything non-human. An animal, an object, Rashi doesn't specifically say that. Whereas Rambam seems to give a different definition. A human who can literally talk.
But we don't know about those people who missing legs and arms.
Rambam would certainly say they qualify as doubt for Sotah, as long as they can talk. He says clearly a blind person qualifies. Whereas when it comes to Sotah, a blind person was certainly excluded. So, not 100,000% clear. I didn't spend a lot of time researching the Rambam, but I just looked at Rashi earlier and just compared it to Rambam, made it interesting. Okay. So it's a little window into what you'd be doing in yeshiva for the next 3 hours. Yeah, so this would be a little window into what you'd be doing for the next 3 hours in yeshiva if this was your task for the day. Figure out why Rambam and Rashi are different, why Rambam limits the comparison to the Sotah. You'd have to look up all the commentaries. So this is the kind of exercise you'd be doing.
Does Rambam cite his sources?
Rambam never cites his sources.
Huh?
Rambam never cites his sources.
Okay.
One of the things he says he regretted.
Right, you mentioned that.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. Have a wonderful day, Yidden.
Good day, Chicago.
Have a wonderful day, Rabbi. Thank you. Yeshikoach. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeshua, all the very best to you. God bless you. You should have a wonderful day, all of you.
Wonderful day.
Thank you.
Okay. Right.